What if the person you've spent your whole life becoming isn't actually you? What if the real you is buried beneath approval, silence, and a mask you didn't even know you were wearing? You think you know who you are. You have a name, a background, a history. Maybe you've taken the tests, Myers-Briggs, Enneagrams, horoscopes, and formed a tidy little box labeled me. You know what you like, what you don't. You've told people, this is just how I am. And maybe you believe it. But what if that version of you isn't really you? What if everything you've called personality is actually a strategy, a mask? Carl Jung didn't believe identity was something you discover. He believed it was something you construct, not out of freedom but out of fear, not out of truth but out of adaptation. Because at some point in your life, maybe early, maybe recent, you realize something terrifying, being your full self, was dangerous. So you adjusted. You shifted. You noticed what got you love, and you amplified it. You noticed what brought disapproval, and you buried it. Over time, those patterns became predictable. People praised you for them. You're so easygoing, they said. You're always the responsible one. And so, it stuck. You reinforced it so well that it became unconscious. But here's what Jung knew, and what most people will never tell you. Your identity is not who you are, it's who you had to be. The version of you that was safest, most acceptable, most likely to be loved in the world you were born into. And if you don't stop to question that version, to peel back its layers, you will live your whole life as a character in a story someone else wrote. This is the lie. That identity is fixed. That who you are is permanent, consistent, stable. But you are not stable. You are fluid, you are dynamic, you are multiplicity, contradiction, complexity wrapped in skin. You weren't born to be one thing, you were born to become. But becoming threatens the mask, and so, most people don't. Unethical, because life, for some, is an undying tribe of endlessly changing realizations. Most people live their entire lives defending their constructed identity. I'm just a people pleaser. I've always been anxious. I'm the strong one. These aren't facts. These are echoes. Echoes of conditioning, echoes of coping. Ask yourself, who were you before the world told you who to be? Who were you before approval became a currency? Jung would tell you this: the self you defend so fiercely isn't the true self. It's the persona, the social mask you wear to function in society. And while the persona is useful, it helps you navigate, relate, belong, it's also dangerous, because the longer you wear it, the more you forget you're wearing a mask at all. You confuse the costume with your skin. You start believing the role. And the tragedy? You begin to fear the parts of you that don't fit the role. So you exile them. You say things like, I could never do that. That's not like me, not realizing that what you call you is a house built from survival, not truth. Here's the part that stings. Your personality as you know it might just be your prison. Let that sink in. The traits you cling to, the roles you replay, the labels you defend, they might not be reflections of your essence, they might be shields. Shields that kept you safe when you were too young to defend yourself any other way. And now, you don't know the difference between your essence and your armor. That's the cost of unconscious identity. Jung believed that real selfhood isn't discovered through labels, it's uncovered through integration, and integration requires war. A war against the illusion that you are only the traits you've performed well. It's a confrontation with everything you've buried, denied, and disowned. Because real identity, the self with a capital S, is not tidy. It's not easily categorized. It's not made of social media bios or resumes or astrology signs. It's messy, it's contradictory, it's wild and sacred and terrifying. And you will never find it while clinging to the idea of a consistent, likable, fixed self. You weren't meant to be consistent. You were meant to grow. But growth threatens the identity you've curated. It asks questions that make people uncomfortable. It shatters the comfort of categories. It challenges the people who know you. Because when you stop performing, they have to stop assuming. And most people would rather keep their assumptions than meet the real you. So you have a choice. You can keep defending the identity that was built to be accepted, or you can start dismantling it to find the one that's real. You can keep saying, "This is just who I am," or you can ask, "Who am I when I stop trying to be anyone?" That's what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming your true self, not by discovering something new, but by peeling away what isn't you. And make no mistake, this is not a linear journey. It's painful, it's chaotic, it's full of doubt, because you're not just changing your mindset, you're breaking up with your mask. You're grieving the version of you that worked so hard to be enough. And that grief, it's real. It deserves to be honored. But so does your becoming. So does your truth. You are not here to be liked. You are here to be whole. And wholeness doesn't come from clinging to one version of yourself. It comes from letting all your parts speak, even the ones you've silenced, especially those. So let this be your turning point, not into someone new, but into someone true. You don't have to keep playing a role to earn your place in the world. You already belong. Now, it's time to remember who you were before the mask, before the praise, before the fear, and to finally become who you are always meant to be. You think you're being yourself, but what if you're just rehearsing a role? That laugh you give when something isn't funny, that polite nod when you disagree, that apology you offer before speaking your truth. These are not small habits, they're rehearsals, performances, lines delivered in a script you didn't even realize you were handed. And every time you follow it, every time you betray a truth just to keep the peace, you strengthen the mask. Carl Jung called this mask the persona. Not an insult, not a flaw, a necessary tool, something you had to build to survive in a world that doesn't welcome rawness, contradiction, or real emotion. The persona is your social armor. It's how you learn to be seen without being fully exposed. It's what got you praised, promoted, invited, approved. And yet, it's also what's suffocating you. Because while the persona might keep you liked, it will never let you be known. And here's the trap. The better you become at performing the persona, the more people reward you for it. The more you're told, "You're so easy to be around, you're so positive, you're so reliable." You start to believe these compliments are evidence of your worth. But they're not about your worth. They're about your usefulness, your palatability, your performance. And eventually the mask becomes a mirror. You forget where it ends and where you begin. You don't even realize it's a mask anymore. You just call it you. That's the danger. Not that you wear a persona, but that you forget it's a costume. And once that happens, you stop questioning it. You stop checking in with your real feelings. You stop letting new parts of yourself emerge. You become fixed, predictable, safe. You become a character in your own life, rehearsing lines you never wrote, fulfilling expectations you never questioned. But here's the thing. No one ever handed you a script and said, "Here, perform this." It was more subtle. It began when you were a child and your anger was punished, when your sensitivity was mocked, when your curiosity made someone uncomfortable. Those weren't just moments, they were instructions, and you followed them. You learned, if I want love, I must become easier, quieter, less. So you shape yourself. You smiled when you were scared, you stayed silent when you were hurt, you played small when you wanted to be seen, and people responded. They said, "Good job." They said, "You're so mature." They said, "You're nothing like your brother." And that praise felt like oxygen. So you kept the mask. And now, You don't even know what your real face looks like underneath it. That's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. Jung believed that the persona isn't evil. It's necessary, it helps you navigate the world. But the danger lies in identifying with it, believing it is all you are. Because when you do that, when you mistake the mask for the man, you lose access to the rest of you, the raw, complicated, contradictory you. You lose the parts of yourself that can't be digested easily, your rage, your hunger, your fire, your softness, your sensuality, your pain. And instead of expressing those parts, you suppress them, not because you want to, but because you're scared of what they might cost you. Because deep down you were taught that truth is too much, that honesty breaks things, that desire threatens connection, and so you edit, you rehearse, you smile, you think you're being kind, but really you're disappearing. And every time you disappear, the mask gets tighter. You feel it in the quiet moments, when the party ends and you're alone, when the compliments stop and you feel hollow, when you can't tell if the people who love you or just the version of you that you've made safe for them. That's what the persona steals. Intimacy, authenticity, your own aliveness. Because you cannot connect deeply while performing, you cannot feel fully while pretending, and you cannot heal while hiding. And yet, people stay in the persona their whole lives. Why? Because the alternative is terrifying. To take off the mask is to risk being misunderstood, to be judged, to be too much, too loud, too angry, too complex. To take off the mask is to say, this is me. I'm not always agreeable. I'm not always composed. I'm not always okay. And not everyone can handle that. Not everyone will stay. And that's the point. Jung said that the path to becoming your true self, the path of individuation, requires the collapse of the persona, not the destruction of it, but the conscious unmasking, the ability to see it for what it is, a tool, not an identity. And when you can see the persona clearly, you can begin to loosen its grip. You can start making different choices. You can start speaking truths even when they're uncomfortable. You can start saying no without explaining. You can stop trying to be the person everyone approves of and start becoming the person you actually are. But make no mistake, that's a death of the people-pleaser, the chameleon, the overachiever, the one who exists to be liked. And with that death comes grief, because the persona protected you. It helped you survive. It got you through childhood, relationships, jobs. You owe it gratitude. Survival is no longer enough. You are not here to survive. You are here to live, to feel, to express, to belong not in roles, but in your raw, real, unfiltered self. And that self? It's been waiting for you to stop rehearsing, waiting for you to say, I'm done performing, waiting for you to walk into a room without adjusting who you are. The mask may have made you likable, but only the truth will make you free. There's a part of you you don't talk about. You feel it in the silence after you bite your tongue, in the heat behind your eyes when you smile but want to scream, in the shame that rises after you say yes when everything in you meant no. It's the part that doesn't fit into your performance, the part you learned early on to hide, to bury, to exile. Carl Jung called that part the shadow. Not evil, not wrong, just unwanted, unacceptable, unapproved. You were taught, maybe not with words, but with looks, with reactions, with silence, that some parts of you were dangerous, your anger, your neediness, your jealousy, your defiance. So you tucked them away, not because they weren't real, but because they weren't welcome. And over time, those parts didn't vanish, they didn't dissolve, they went underground. You didn't delete them, you just buried them. But here's the thing about the shadow. It doesn't die. It waits. And the longer it waits, the more powerful it becomes, not in the light but in the dark, in the unconscious. It starts driving your behavior from underneath. It shows up in sabotage, in shame, in projection, in addiction, in the moments when you look at yourself and ask, "Why did I do that?" Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Read that again. Because that line is the door, it's the threshold between the life you're performing and the life you were meant to live. You don't find your true self by improving your routines or manifesting your goals or curating your image. You find it by turning around, by facing the part of you you've been running from. And make no mistake, the shadow isn't just some abstract psychological idea, it's personal. It's your story. It's the parts of your childhood where you learned to be quiet, the friendships where you learned you had to give more to be chosen, the family that only loved you when you were useful. That's the shadow, not some mystical energy. It's your unspoken pain, your exiled truth, your real voice, locked behind a mask you forgot you were wearing. And to face it, that's not self-care. That's self-confrontation. That's war. Not against anyone else, but against the image you've been defending your whole life. You think you're scared of being rejected, but what you're really scared of is being seen, fully, unfiltered, without the edits, without the pleasantries, without the protection. Because deep down you're terrified that if someone saw all of you, the rage, the confusion, the need, they'd walk away. And maybe they would. But the real question isn't whether they'd leave. It's whether you'd finally stay. Because as long as you're denying the shadow, you're abandoning yourself. You're choosing approval over truth, safety over aliveness. You're saying, "I'll be anyone but me as long as you don't leave." And that's not selfhood, that's self-erasure. Jung knew this. He didn't believe in becoming better. He believed in becoming whole. That means taking back what you gave up to survive. That means going down, not up, into the parts of you that feel chaotic, shameful, unacceptable, not to indulge them, not to act them out, but to own them. To say, "Yes, this is also me." That's the turning point. When you stop asking, "How do I fix myself?" and start asking, "What parts of me have I been afraid to claim?" This isn't about healing so you can be more pleasant. This is about remembering who you were before you had to be pleasant at all. Because here's the truth. The shadow isn't dangerous. What's dangerous is ignoring it, pretending it's not there, keeping it in the basement of your psyche while you perform politeness upstairs. Because it leaks. It always leaks. It comes out in passive aggression, in people-pleasing, in panic attacks, in perfectionism, in the moments you lose your temper at the smallest things. That's not out of nowhere. That's the shadow screaming through the cracks. And every time you ignore it, it grows. So, you have a choice. You can keep polishing the mask, keep rehearsing the script, keep saying what you're supposed to say, and wondering why you feel so empty. Or you can turn around. You can descend into the shadow, into the grief, the rage, the guilt, the longing. You can look at the parts of you you've been too afraid to meet and say, "I see you, I remember you, I'm not going to exile you anymore." And when you do that, something shifts. You stop being split, you stop living half a life, you stop performing healing and start embodying it. But don't confuse this with a quick fix. Shadow work isn't pretty, it's not aesthetic, it's not for your feed. It's for your freedom. It's for the moment you finally speak without shrinking, finally say no without apologizing, finally feel something without filtering it through what will they think. That's the power of integration. When you stop trying to be good and start trying to be whole. When you stop hiding and start holding. Yeah, all of you. Especially the parts that were never safe to show. Especially the feelings that scared even you. because those are the parts that hold your fire, your instincts, your clarity, your power. You thought they were the problem, but they were the parts you needed to survive. You just weren't allowed to use them. Now you are. Now you have to. Because you're not here to be liked. You're here to be real. And being real means walking into the parts of yourself that you were taught to avoid. It means feeling it all, owning it all, integrating it all. Not for them, for you. Because your truth is not too much. Your shadow is not shameful. Your wholeness is not dangerous. It's Hully. You were taught that being nice made you good. From the time you could speak, you were told to be polite, to share, to not talk back. You learned that kindness was currency, that smiling made you safe, that compliance earned you love. And somewhere along the way, you confused those things with morality. You started believing that to be good was to be agreeable, that silence was strength, that shrinking was virtue. But what if being nice is what's killing you? What if your obedience, your emotional compliance, isn't a sign of maturity but of fear? Carl Jung didn't romanticize this kind of goodness. He saw it for what it really was, the mask of the persona. A socially approved identity designed not to express your truth but to protect you from rejection. And while it may have made you acceptable, it has also made you invisible. Because here's what no one tells you: when you are always the peacemaker, the giver, the understanding one, you slowly erase yourself. Not all at once, no in grand gestures, but in the small betrayals, the quiet concessions, the times you said it's fine when it wasn't, the times you bit your tongue until your jaw hurt, the times you said yes with a smile and cried alone afterward. That's not kindness, that's emotional obedience. You don't speak your mind because you've learnt it makes people uncomfortable. You don't show anger because you've been told it's dangerous. You don't ask for what you need because you're afraid of seeming selfish. And so you wait, you give, you accommodate, and you start to disappear. That's the cost of being good. You lose yourself one polite moment at a time. And then something strange happens. You start to resent the people around you, not because they're cruel, but because they keep taking what you keep offering. You begin to feel unseen, unheard, unloved, but not because they're failing you, because you've trained them not to see you. You taught them your no means maybe. You taught them your silence means consent. You taught them your smile means I'm okay. Now you're angry, not just at them, but at yourself, because deep down you know the truth. You weren't chosen for who you are. You were accepted for the mask you wear. And that's not love, that's performance. Jung would call this a crisis of the soul. Because when you over-identify with the persona, when you believe that being good means being agreeable, you disconnect from your power, you exile your sharpness, you censor your clarity, and what's left is a life of endless moderation. You're never too loud, too angry, too honest, too much. You're never anything fully. You live in the in-between. But the truth is this: no one ever became whole by being nice. Niceness isn't the same as goodness. Niceness is strategy, it's performance, it's the path of least resistance. But goodness, the real kind, is fierce, it's bold. It sets boundaries. It speaks when the room is silent. It risks disapproval to honor the truth. That's what you were born for. Not to be liked, but to be real. But being real means you have to start disappointing people, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity, because every time you say yes when you mean no, you abandon yourself. And every time you abandon yourself, your soul decays a little more. You think you're keeping the peace, but what you're really doing is declaring war on your own inner world. But that war shows up everywhere, in the exhaustion that doesn't go away, in the relationships that drain you, in the quiet resentment that builds like poison in your chest. You wonder why you're tired. It's because being emotionally obedient is labor. It's heavy. It takes effort to monitor every word, every tone, every gesture, to make sure you're not too much, too harsh, too real. And eventually your body starts speaking the truth your mouth won't say. In tension, in illness, in anxiety that doesn't respond to logic. That's not coincidence. That's your shadow trying to breathe. That's the part of you that's tired of being edited. Jung believed the way out wasn't more obedience, it was individuation, becoming whole. And wholeness doesn't look like constant patience. It looks like boundaries. It looks like anger when anger is appropriate. It looks like saying no and meaning it. It looks like not answering texts. It looks like letting people be disappointed and realizing the world didn't end. It looks like choosing truth over harmony. It looks like choosing you. And no, that doesn't mean becoming cruel. It means becoming clear. Clarity is not cruelty. It's integrity. And the moment you start living from it, you'll lose people. Make peace with that now. Because the people who benefited from your obedience won't celebrate your liberation. They'll call you selfish, difficult, mean. They'll say you've changed. And they'll be right. You have changed. You've stopped rehearsing. You've stopped bending. You've stopped apologizing for being a full human with full needs and full emotions. And in that space, after the guilt, after the grief, comes something radical. Not the peace that comes from avoiding conflict, the peace that comes from no longer being at war with yourself. That's the kind of peace Jung was pointing to, not the peace of niceness, the peace of wholeness. And you can't find it while living for other people's comfort. You can't find it while confusing your silence with strength. You can't find it while mistaking your emotional obedience for love. So stop asking if you're being too much. Start asking if you're being true. Stop softening your voice so others won't flinch. Start trusting that the people who can hold your truth are the only ones worth keeping. Because being good never required you to be small. You were not born to be palatable. You were born to be powerful. And your power doesn't live in your performance. It lives in your presence. Unapologetic, unrehearsed, unfiltered. It always starts the same way. You meet someone, they feel electric, familiar, like home. You tell yourself it's chemistry. You tell yourself you just click. But what if that feeling isn't connection at all? What if it's recognition? Not of love, but of an old wound. Carl Jung warned us, you don't just run from your shadow. You fall in love with it. You project it onto the people you crave, the people you fear, the people you can't seem to let go of, no matter how much they hurt you. That's the nature of projection. It's unconscious. You're not choosing it, it's choosing you. You think you're drawn to someone because of who they are, but you're actually drawn to them because of what they mirror back to you. Something unresolved, something familiar, something buried so deep it feels like fate. And that's the trap. Because what you call a pattern is usually just your shadow playing dress-up in someone else's body. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you haven't healed. You say, why do I always end up with people who make me feel small? But the real question is, what part of me still believes I deserve to feel small? You say, why do I keep choosing partners who can't commit? But maybe the question is, what part of me is terrified of being fully chosen? This is where the unconscious reveals itself, not in dreams or symbols, but in your relationships, in the people you chase, in the people who trigger you, in the people you try to fix. Because every time you try to fix someone else, what you're really trying to do is heal something in yourself. Jung didn't see projection as a flaw, he saw it as a mirror, a tool, a way to understand the pieces of yourself you haven't faced yet, because whatever you deny in yourself, you will end up chasing or fighting in other people. If you repress your anger, you'll be drawn to those who express it loudly. If you deny your sensitivity, you'll seek out people who make you feel like you're too much. If you've silenced your needs, you'll find yourself endlessly giving to those who never reciprocate, hoping that maybe this time you'll be enough. But it's not about them. It never was. They're just the surface, the symptom, the trigger. The real work is underneath, in you. And until you go there, until you turn inward, you will keep playing out the same script with different faces. You'll call it bad luck, you'll call it love, you'll call it destiny. But it's none of those things. It's your shadow asking to be integrated. Because the shadow doesn't just hide in shame, it hides in worship, in obsession, in infatuation. The people you idolize, the people you put on pedestals, they carry traits you've exiled in yourself. You're not just admiring them, you're trying to reclaim what you gave up. That woman who's bold, unapologetic, loud, maybe you buried those traits to be accepted. That man who's stoic, emotionally untouchable, maybe you were punished for your sensitivity. You see what you've disowned, you fall in love with it, you chase it. But instead of integrating it, you project it outward and hope that being close to it will somehow make you whole. It won't, because proximity is not the same as integration. You can sleep next to someone who embodies your shadow and still feel empty. You can build a life with someone who mirrors your wounds and still feel unseen. Because until you reclaim what you've lost, no one else can give it to you. Not for long. And this is why relationships, especially the painful ones, are your greatest teachers. Not because they break you, but because they show you where you're already broken. Not because they hurt you, but because they reveal the places where you've been hurting for years. You don't attract toxic people by accident. You attract them by pattern. And patterns are not curses, they're clues. They show you what you've normalized, what you've mistaken for love, what you've been rehearsing since childhood without even realizing it. You learned early what love looked like. Maybe it looked like inconsistency, maybe it looked like chasing, maybe it looked like silence, approval, distance. And now, that's what feels like home. Not because it's healthy, but because it's familiar. Familiar is what your nervous system trusts, even if it's what your heart dreads. And until you question that familiarity, you will call dysfunction love. You will chase the same pain, hoping this time it ends differently. It won't. Not until you turn the mirror around. Not until you ask, what part of me keeps choosing this? What wound in me is being activated? What am I trying to resolve, relive, repair? This is the hard part, because it means taking responsibility for your patterns. Not blame, not shame, but responsibility. It means saying, I'm not a victim of love, I'm a participant in a pattern. And once you see that, you can change it. You can pause before chasing the person who reminds you of your past. You can choose presence over intensity. You can stop asking, do they love me, and start asking, do I love myself when I'm with them? That's the shift. That's how projection becomes power. Not by erasing the pattern, but by using it to understand yourself more deeply. Because everything you're drawn to is a message. Every heartbreak is a mirror. Every trigger is an invitation. Not to run, not to perform, but to integrate. To bring the exiled parts of you back home. So the next time you ask, why do I attract what hurts me? Pause and ask instead, what in me is still asking to be seen? Because when you finally face it, when you look at the pattern without flinching, you stop being a puppet of your shadow, and you start becoming its master. Not by dominating it, but by embracing it, by saying this is also me and I don't need to chase it in others anymore. That's how you stop repeating the past. That's how you step into the present. That's how you begin to heal. There's a moment on this path no one prepares you for. It's not triumphant, it's not cinematic, it doesn't come with applause or closure. It comes in the stillness, in the silence after you finally say the truth you've been swallowing for years, in the days when you look in the mirror and barely recognize the person staring back. It comes when the mask starts to slip, not because you forced it, but because you're too tired to keep holding it up. This is the death of the false self, and it's not pretty. Carl Jung called it the night sea journey, a descent, a disintegration, a psychic unraveling, not because something went wrong, but because something finally stopped pretending to be right. You don't wake up one day and shed your persona like it's old clothing. You mourn it, you break down under it, you claw your way through it, like a skin that no longer fits but refuses to let go. Because the persona didn't just protect you, it was you. For so long, it got you the job, the relationship, the praise. It helped you survive spaces that would have swallowed you whole. It gave you an identity when you didn't know who you were. It gave you predictability, consistency, safety. But safety has a price. And at some point, the price becomes too high because you realize you've built a life that looks good on the outside but feels hollow inside. You realize that every yes you gave wasn't a choice. It was a compulsion, a performance, a desperate plea to be loved, even if it meant being invisible. That's when the night sea journey begins. When the mask starts to rot, when the applause feels empty, when the roles feel suffocating, and you start to feel something strange. Grief. Grief for the version of you that everyone loved. Grief for the illusion you worked so hard to maintain. Grief for the identity that made you feel in control, even if it wasn't real. And it is grief. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Because you're not just letting go of a mask, you're letting go of an entire self-concept, a version of you that was polished, predictable, pleasing, a version that knew how to survive, that knew how to perform connection, even while feeling utterly alone. You will miss that version of you, even as it dies, even as you know it has to. Because the truth is, nothing real can begin until the false self dies. You can't be whole and still be performing. You can't be free and still be managing perception. You can't be alive and still be obeying an identity that was built from fear. This is the part most people avoid. They want the clarity without the collapse, the growth without the grief, the truth without the terror. But it doesn't work like that. There is no awakening without a burial, no rebirth without the funeral of who you used to be. And it's not a one-time moment, it's a process. Some days you'll feel powerful, clear, aligned. Other days you'll feel lost, untethered, like you're wandering through fog without a compass, because that's exactly what's happening. You're dismantling your inner architecture, and for a while, it feels like there's nothing solid left. This is what Jung meant when he said, the path of individuation isn't about becoming someone new, it's about becoming who you've always been beneath the performance. But to get there, everything false has to burn. There are the roles you outgrew but kept wearing because they made other people comfortable, or the beliefs that were never yours but became law in your body. All the relationships that only worked because you kept sacrificing yourself to make them work. And as they burn, you will feel alone, profoundly alone. Because the false self was never just a mask, it was a bridge. It connected you to people, to systems, to structures that needed you to stay small, agreeable, predictable. When you stop playing the part, those connections fray. People won't know what to do with the real you. Some will leave. Some will try to fix you, pull you back into the role, tell you you've changed, that you're being difficult, that you used to be easier. They're not wrong. You were easier when you weren't yourself. Now you're something else. Now you're honest. Now you're dangerous. Because nothing is more threatening to the world than a person who doesn't perform for acceptance. Nothing is more powerful than someone who has walked through the fire of their own disintegration and lived to tell the truth. That truth will cost you, but it will also set you free. And the freedom isn't always light and euphoric. Sometimes it's heavy, sometimes it's numb, sometimes it's so quiet it feels like loss. Because it is loss. But beneath the loss, something ancient stirs. A knowing, a whisper, a presence that was buried for years under the weight of who you thought you had to be. And when it starts to rise, it won't scream. It will stand. It will anchor. It will say, "This is who I am," not because it's easy, but because it's real. And that is the real becoming. Not a new mask. Not a better role. At the end of roles altogether, the emergence of a self so rooted, so raw, so clear, it doesn't need validation to breathe. It doesn't need to be liked to exist. It doesn't need to be understood to be true. It just is. That's the gift of the night sea journey. You lose everything that was false. And in the ashes, you find the one thing that can't be taken from you, yourself. There's a moment that comes after the storm, after the unraveling, after the silence, after the aching loss of the false self. It's not loud, it doesn't announce itself with fireworks or fanfare. It comes quietly, like a sunrise, a stillness, a clarity that wasn't there before. It's the moment you realize you're no longer pretending. You're no longer performing for love. You're no longer contorting for approval. You're just here. Carl Jung called this state individuation, not transformation, not improvement, but integration, the process of becoming whole, of reclaiming every lost, hidden, denied part of yourself and learning how to walk in the world without shrinking, without flinching, without apologizing. This isn't about becoming someone better. It's about remembering someone ancient. Yeah, not the version of you that was praised for being easy, not the version of you that was rewarded for being quiet, not the version that became whatever others needed, but the real you, the one who existed before the world told you who to be. Living from that place changes everything. Because suddenly, you stop seeking yourself in others, you stop chasing relationships that feel like rescue missions, you stop asking rooms for permission to exist. You walk in knowing you belong, not because of how well you fit, but because of how deeply you know yourself. That kind of presence can't be taught. It can't be faked. It can only be earned, through fire, through grief, through facing the shadow and letting the persona die. And once you earn it, you start showing up differently. Not louder, clearer. You don't need to raise your voice because your energy speaks for you. You don't need to justify your choices because your life becomes your explanation. You don't need to beg to be understood because you've stopped needing to be decoded. You've made peace with being known only by those who can know you. And that's more than enough. This is what integrated presence feels like. A rootedness, a weight in your chest that says, I know who I am. Not in a rigid, fixed way, but in a fluid, alive way. Because real identity isn't a cage. It's a current. It moves. It evolves. It breathes. And so do you. Because now, instead of rehearsing the right thing to say, you just say the thing. Instead of analyzing every reaction, you let it happen. Instead of obsessing over how you're being perceived, you focus on how you feel when you're with them. That's the difference. That's the shift. From being an object in someone else's story to being the subject of your own. From being edited to being expressed. From surviving to actually living. But don't misunderstand this. Wholeness doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean you never doubt, never stumble, never ache. It means you stop hiding when you do. It means you meet your humanity with presence instead of shame. You feel the fear, but you don't run from it. You feel the insecurity, but you don't shrink beneath it. You feel the urge to perform, but you breathe and choose truth instead. That's power, not the kind that dominates others, but the kind that cannot be dominated. Because you are no longer a fragment. You are no longer divided against yourself. You've reclaimed the parts you once feared. The anger, the grief, the desire, the tenderness, the clarity. And now they walk with you. They speak through you. They shape your presence. And people feel it, even if they don't understand it. They sense that you're not available for manipulation, that your silence isn't submission, it's sovereignty, that your no isn't negotiable, it's sacred. You become someone who sets the tone of a room without saying a word, someone who mirrors back to others their own disconnection, someone who makes people question why they still wear masks you've already burned. That's the quiet revolution of the integrated self. You stop trying to fix others. You stop trying to save them. You simply embody the thing they're still looking for. And in doing so, you give permission, not through words, but through presence. You become a living permission slip for authenticity, for contradiction, for freedom. You say without saying it, you don't have to perform anymore. I'm not. But let's be honest, living like this isn't always easy. Because the world still rewards personas. It still praises performance. It still punishes rawness. And some days you'll feel the pull to go back, to soften your edges, to bite your tongue, to play the role again. Don't. That role nearly cost you everything. Keep the edges. Keep the fire. Keep the softness that doesn't apologize for being real. Because the world doesn't need more likable people. It needs more alive people. And aliveness isn't convenient. It's disruptive. But it's also magnetic. Because when you're integrated, when your shadow is no longer a secret, your presence becomes a lighthouse. You don't have to chase. You don't have to prove. You simply are. And those who are meant to walk with you will find you in that light. That's the reward. Not applause. Not perfection. But peace. Not the peace of avoidance, but the peace of alignment. The kind of peace that can't be bought or borrowed or performed. The kind of peace that only comes when you finally stop running from yourself. So here you are. Not someone new, but someone true. Not someone improved, but someone whole. You've walked through the fire. You've let the mask burn. You've faced the shadow. And you came back not empty but full. Full of presence. Full of power. Full of the self the world once told you to hide. This is what it means to live as the real you. No apologies. No rehearsals. Just truth.